Hey guys, Leah Campion here, your weight loss expert and author of the book Ditch the Diet. Today, I am very privileged to be interviewing Dr. Teralyn Sell. She has a lot of notoriety and authority, and the list goes on, expertise behind her name. But she is most notably a licensed professional counselor, and she likes to call herself a food shrink anxiety tamer. I love that. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Dr. Teralyn interviewed me recently on a topic I love to talk about, and that was related to emotional eating. And definitely it is wrapped all in anxiety for sure. And so I'm very interested to see what Dr. Teralyn is going to share with us today. We're going to be talking about mental health and brain health in particular. So Dr. Teralyn, take it away.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. I'm used to being the host, so I have to change it around just a little bit here. Yep. So Leah was on my podcast called Kick Off Your Damn Heels that you can find at kickoffyourdamnheels.com. And so what I love to do on that podcast too is to bring on all kinds of guests that have natural ways to help people with anxiety, particularly in living healthy lives. So it is near and dear to my heart because I've struggled with anxiety and depression in the past and used medications and didn't find any success with that. And then finally just decided to change my life, change my lifestyle around. So my whole practice now, I'm a professional counselor in the state of Wisconsin. So if you're in Wisconsin, I can be your therapist if you'd like. Across the country, though, I have to be more of a brain health coach around anxiety. So I could partner with a therapist that way. And so what I do is I do some functional labs for people, primarily focusing on cortisol levels and neurotransmitter levels. So I look at dopamine, which a lot of people are familiar with dopamine, and adrenaline, and GABA and glutamate and serotonin levels. So it's a whole body level of these. There's a high correlation between the output of urine and what's in your cerebral spinal fluid. That's the closest that we're going to get. So I look at that and then offer completely natural ways to rebalance those for you. And you would be surprised at how profoundly it can change people's mental health. I think we're in a society that wants a quick fix. So medication has become that quick fix, but it's really not that quick. It takes 4 to 6 weeks to even feel something different with medication. And that's if it works for you. So many people come into my office where medication hasn't been successful. So what happens is that the psychiatrists or physicians prescribing end up stacking meds on top of meds or changing dosages or discarding a med and starting something new. So you're on the medication roller coaster. This happens a lot in children, particularly ADHD kiddos and even anxiety and depression kiddos. So I've worked with kids as young as 3 on the brain health, and I've worked with adults as old as like 80, on this. So it becomes kind of like a quest. And again, it's an exact science, as exact as we can make it, because we're all bio-individual people. So getting dosages correct on my end, I use what's called amino acids and nutrient supplementation primarily, and healthy lifestyle. Getting those dosages correct is very individual. Some people find value in a lesser dose. Some people need a lot more. And I also do this with the addiction population because they're specifically depleted in tons of things, which is also fascinating. When you can get people feeling better in a couple weeks, there's usually a lot of buy-in to what you're doing.
Right. So, Now, when you say addiction, is it specific addictions, just maybe like to drugs or alcohol, or also like food addictions?
Sure, like any addiction, process addictions too, which are like gambling addictions, pornography, those are called process
Yep.
addictions. So those, and is also like alcohol and other addictive substances, including sugars, you know. So once you can get that stuff in line and also balance your blood sugars, as long as we're talking about that, like that's huge,
Yeah.
everybody. If you can balance your blood sugars as a primary starting point, you are going to be better off all around with mental health symptoms and addiction symptoms or relapse. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. And can you explain why that is, Dr. Teralyn? Like, how's the blood sugar level related to, well, I guess brain health, right? Is that what you're saying
Sure.
essentially?
Yeah.
Or
So,
mental?
well, when you think about it, when you work with people who have mental health issues or even addiction issues, a lot of times they're not eating, period. Right. So it's always the first question that I ask someone, like, when is the last time you ate today? That is, I would say 100% of the time I ask that question. And typically I get this response. I don't know if I ate today. I'm not really sure if I ate today, or no, I did not eat today, or the last time I ate was yesterday.
Wow.
Right. So that question, like, when is the last time you ate, is so important because it tells you so much. Then the next question is, what did you eat? Because I'll get that too. Well, I had breakfast. Well, what did you have? Well, I had a donut and a cup of coffee. Ooh. Okay, great. An unfed brain is a stressed out brain. You're not going to be thinking. This is why what happens is that when you're in low blood sugar, your body will start to produce adrenaline. And when adrenaline is kicked in, adrenaline is your fight or flight. Okay. So what happens is it'll actually shut off your prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking brain. Right? So when my thinking brain is shut off, what am I doing? I'm typically doing and saying things I wish I wouldn't have said and done, like reaching for an addictive substance, right? Now my coping skills are offline as well. So when your adrenaline is pumping, that's when you're going to have people that are fidgety and leg bouncers and all of that when you're in high or low blood sugar. So our blood sugars rise and fall throughout the day, like nicely, but when you're doing this all the time,
Yeah.
you're going to experience anxiety here. You're going to experience depression and anxiety down here. So stabilizing blood sugar is like number one for mental health and addiction. It's crazy when people come into my office and I notice that they're kind of shaky or fidgety. When I ask them that question, I'll go and grab some string cheese, or I'll go and grab some protein shakes for them. Within 20 minutes, they're back online and ready to engage. I tell people all the time, I can't think your way out of blood sugar rises and falls.
Yeah.
If you're in a low blood sugar hypoglycemic state, like, we need to get your brain back online before we can even engage in therapy,
Wow.
So yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. That definitely all connects together.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting because it reminds me of when I tell people that they've used willpower all day long. They're at the end of the day and they need to say no again to something that they want, but they know they shouldn't have. Their brain is exhausted, just like a muscle that's been over fatigued. And that reminds me when you're saying that the body's producing adrenaline and then it's shutting off the prefrontal cortex, we're kind of removing our ability to make a sound decision.
Correct.
So
right. So if you have someone that's like having willpower, I'm going to use that loosely, all day, like, what does that mean? Are they starving their body all day? Are they just avoiding eating or whatever? Then they get home and their brain is so hungry that it's like, I'm just going to grab whatever I can, to put it in my mouth. And then I don't have willpower anymore. Well, that's because you can't. When your brain is offline, you legitimately are not involved in any calm processing that says, hey, how about another choice? How about we do something different? No, because your nervous system, the adrenaline is pumping, your nervous system is on, and you think you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. That's the response. That's a survival response.
Right.
It's no longer willpower. It's your body and brain thinking that you need to survive something, right? A
Yes,
perceived attack. And the
exactly.
perceived attack is, well, maybe there's no more food around, and I need to find it. I need to get it, So the brain is fascinating. I always say it's like the most interesting, intricate, complex, and stupid organ that we have. because we no longer need that response. Typically, we're not being chased by bears and saber-toothed tigers to survive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're being chased by stress or perceived stress, or just the inability to, feed ourselves appropriately throughout the day,
Yep.
to avoid those pitfalls.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about that, the stress and the perceived stress, because I have read and read over and over again that it's not always the actual stress that we're under. We add stress to our minds essentially by perceiving that we're in a stressful situation. And of course, two different people can be in the same situation and handle it differently simply because of that perception, right? This
Mm-hmm.
person's coping better or handling it differently than I am.
Or
Because
fed.
there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe
Yeah.
that's just, opens a door of explanation that we might not have had there before. But how does this perception work with, I guess, our ability to manage stress and that whole bit of anxiety related to our stressful lives?
Well, first of all, what I wanted to say is, like, stress isn't always bad. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're under stress all the time, stressors, and stress can be very motivating.
Yeah.
It's just when it becomes like an overload of stress. And
Mm-hmm.
the perceived stress, I think, is when you look at your life and you take that life inventory and you're like, well, this is bad and this is bad and this is bad. And we don't have a balanced view of anything that could be good, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's when I go back to that survival thing. Like, if Teralyn was a cave woman, right? All I would be doing is looking for problems to be solved so I could stay alive, right? So our lizard brains, our survival brains are still programmed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same type of survival. But I can certainly look around my life and stack up all the stresses that I have. But I can also look around my life and stack up all the good, positive, calm things that I have. It's when those viewpoints become imbalanced that we have trouble. And that imbalance can go back into neurotransmitter imbalance, which is directly tied to nutrition, which is directly tied to excessive stress that we put on ourselves, or just environmental stress, So stress and nutrition tie closely into brain health. So, looking around and figuring out how to, I hate to say like de-stress or reframe stressful situations, I think is important. Learning to let go some stressful situations, like why hang on to some stuff, I do talk about this idea that all the stressful thoughts that we have in our brains, we put it in there, right? And we cultivated it and we keep it alive, right? So if it's so easy to choose the negative stressful patterns, let's choose some positive, less stressful patterns to replace that with. You can replace it with a lot of things, even like sensory things. Like, what do you smell? What do you hear? What do you see? What do you taste? How does your body feel? Then you're getting out of your brain and back into your life, which is I'd rather focus on this external thing in my body than a consistent focus on negative thought patterns, right? Right. And so in order to do that, it's not just as easy as saying, well, stop thinking about it. Well, that's nice and simple. Too bad it doesn't work, It's
wishful.
It's wishful. It's like, okay, I want to stop and think about it. So first of all, I have to notice that I'm doing it. And then I have to replace it with something like, sometimes I say, envision a stop sign in front of you, or just do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I'm going to think about something else, or engage in one of your senses that we don't use to their fullest ability, right? To help us de-stress. Like even the sense of smell, like, you know, sometimes we pay attention to it. Like if something's burning, we might pay attention to that, right? Or if, you know, you baked cookies, we might pay attention to that momentarily, but we don't ever really use it like, what do I smell right now? And really think about it and really pay attention to it to get outside of your brain. So there's lots of fun things that we can do involving our senses to help with the stress response.
Okay. And so it wouldn't necessarily be introducing a pleasant smell, kind of like aromatherapy.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I put my Motivate on right before I got on here.
Nice.
But yeah, you can definitely have that in like your toolbox, like have it right by you and introduce that right then and there. When you find yourself drifting off into those negative thought patterns, have something that will help you shift that easier until you don't need that thing anymore, you know?
Right. You know, I love that you say that we cultivate those thoughts. And kind of, we're in a sense cultivating that environment, really, because that the stressful environment many times is just made in our heads or exacerbated in our heads, right?
Yeah.
And it reminds me of what I read before about, I don't know the author, but it's the book Super Coach, and I can't remember his name, but he talks about our thoughts and getting on the train of thoughts. You know how I talk about, oh, I lost my train of thought, but he says, you know, your thoughts are kind of like this train. They're moving in a direction, and you can choose to stay on that train that you're on, heading in whichever direction it is. But if you realize that it's heading in a direction you didn't want to go, for example, once you start thinking about things that make you feel anxious and stressed, and you're just getting upset, right? They're negative thoughts. You know good and well that all the way at the destination of that train, it's going to take you somewhere where you don't want to end. You may be physically ill when you get to that destination. You may be, I mean, very extreme. You may even be suicidal when you get to that destination, right? And so the moment you realize you're heading in that direction and you're like, oh, wait, no, I didn't want to go in this direction. I have the choice to get off of this train and take another train. Oh, yes, I wanted to go this way, to happiness,
yeah,
to
right.
joy.
I want the train to happiness. Right. I want the train to Funky Town. That's what I want.
Right? Just hear the song now.
Right.
And so maybe it is the song, truly. You know,
right.
Like you said, our senses, like listening. Okay, let me put on a happy beat and take that train. And you sometimes have to deliberately remind yourself. It's like when I was a kid and I was having a nightmare, and I would wake up and then I would fall back to sleep, and I realized I was getting back and I was finishing the dream, and I'm like, oh no, wait, I can't I can't finish that. That's terrible. It's awful.
I don't want that.
Right. So then I would always, as a child, say, let me pretend it's my birthday. Right. And now as an adult, it's like, let me pretend I'm on a beach somewhere, or the things that we love, you know, or that we enjoy. So that is, I love that because like you said, it's easier to say, okay, I'm going to get off that train, but then what do you fill your mind with? So then you've got to replace it with some happy thoughts, some gratitude. I even thought when you were talking about balance, right? We're seeing like doom and gloom and despair, but gratitude helps to add true perspective, right?
Right. So I want to talk about that because a lot of people talk about gratitude journals and things like that, and they're very important, but also pick other positive emotions around that, like a pride journal, a joy journal, like all of those emotions are slightly different, but yet they're still going to create a different neural pathway in your brain, right? And I think what you're saying with the train thing is always remember that you can make a different decision. I say this, like, we don't have to commit. I don't have to commit to the negative train. I don't have to. I can jump off at any point and remind myself what I was really after, you know? And I've looked at this in terms of like, you know, your life is this big like wheat field, right? And you're standing on the edge of the wheat field, and off in the distance is what you want. And over time, you've created a path It's well worn. There's dirt. It's just a big dirt path. It's so easy just to get to that end, the end place that you don't like, but we keep walking it because it seems easier, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Familiar.
It's
Right.
very familiar. It's easy. I don't have to like kick anything around. I can just go and it's right
Yeah.
there. The path to the thing that we really want is filled with wheat. Like there's all this brush and everything there, and we have to chop it down and flatten it, you know, until we've made it like the path over here. But remember, every time we chop down this path over here to create something new, something's going to grow over this path that'll make it harder to get to the end. All right. So I look at it like that, like this harvesting and this growth and stuff like that. But we have made this path so easy. Let's do the same thing over here to the path of health, wellness, and mental strength. You know, the path over here seems like despair. Like I will never get out of this. It's so easy to go down this thought, you know, these thought patterns and things like that. And then, you know, when you're kind of stuck in that, that's when you kind of do need like help with a therapist. Like, why do I want to stay over here? You know, how is that serving me to be in this spot and not wanting to do this over here, you know?
So you kind of read my mind. That was what I was curious about, because I love talking about habits. Of course, they're very closely tied to health and weight loss, which I constantly talk about. My community is enthralled in that. So when we're talking about habits, I know you were talking about a pathway metaphorically. However, it's like making a highway in our brain, right?
Definitely.
And that's how habits are formed. So also, when we're talking about habits, they usually form because there was a reward tied to a behavior, right? So there's a cue, you do this behavior, and then there's a reward. Cue, behavior, reward. And this kind of creates that habit loop, right? So kind of curious, what is the reward for a habit? And would you say, first, anxiety is a habitual response, I guess, in some people. And secondly, what could the reward be? Why do we continue to engage in that when we aren't even comfortable really in the situation of the anxiety?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And I don't have, because I think everybody's answer to that is going to be a little bit different. But what you said was like, there's comfort in your own discomfort. So the reward might just be being comfortable, you know? I know this path. I've walked it a million times. It's comfortable. You know? So that might be the reward, is that there's just comfort in your own discomfort. Sometimes rewards are a little bit different. Like I'll be the anxious person because I've been anxious since I've been a teenager, right? So now my personality is wrapped up in being the anxious person.
Yeah,
so
that's my label.
That's my label, and I've labeled it myself, and everybody knows me as that. What would happen? There's fear around this. What would happen if I could drop that label? I don't know. Like, who would I be if I wasn't the anxious person? You know, that's also something to really consider, you know, and that's like that internal sense of self and worth and, you know, all of that stuff wrapped up into those labels of who you are. And being, you know, not afraid to drop some of those labels and just explore, you know, what it would be like if you didn't assign those labels to you, or your peer group didn't have them. You know, it's funny because I talk about, even with addictions, like some people are just known to be, I don't know, potheads or whatever. Like, you know, you see Joe walking down the street and you know what Joe's doing, right? Like he's you know, smoking marijuana or whatever all the time. Joe's the guy to go to for that. Joe has trouble letting that go for himself because he's known for that, right? So if I'm known for this and I let go of this facade around me, now I can only see myself. Now I only have to figure out me and not this weird role that I've created around myself, right? This persona. So it's fascinating. It gets pretty deep, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
I wish it were easier, you know, But what's that saying? I didn't say it was going to be easy. I said it was going to be worth it.
Yeah, so true. Very good. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've kind of taken us through, you've connected for us how anxiety can be really a trip up when it comes to weight loss, because that anxiety, I guess, and that constant state of being overstressed is inhibiting our brains from working, essentially. And so then we can't make sound decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Are there particular practices? I mean, I know that you mentioned as far as stress, maybe how we can reframe, learn to let go, and then, try to turn to our senses for help. But are there other tools or resources, things that would kind of help or work with anxiety and or stress?
Sure. So I wanted to touch on, do you know what the vagus nerve is? Have you heard of the vagus nerve?
I have, yeah, probably. I haven't written about it or talked about it in my community, so it would be very good to share that.
Okay. So the vagus nerve is like the biggest nerve in your body, and it goes from the base of your skull all the way down to your bottom. And it's part of your autonomic nervous system, which is the things you do automatically, like breathe. So it touches your lungs, it touches your throat, it touches your eyes, it touches your stomach, like it touches your intestines, right? And so it is part of the calm response that you would have. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've lived in stress for a really long time or anxiety for a really long time, it's like your vagus nerve has not been worked out for a while. Kind of like if I were running, if I were jogging, if I were a jogger, and I never lifted arm weights, my arms would be not toned, but my legs would be really toned, right? So you'd have to kind of pay attention to the tone of your arms, right, to kind of balance you out. Well, our society is so stressful right now that our vagal tone is so poor. All right. So it's kind of like we need to look at working out our vagus nerve. All right. And so to work out your vagus nerve and make it allow the relaxation response again, like to wake it up, right? And say, it's okay. I can be relaxed. You can do things like, we talk about yoga. And when I say yoga, I don't mean like hot yoga, workout yoga. I mean like mindful, meditative, stretching, breathing type yoga, right? Some weirder things to think about are gargling. So when we gargle, we're actually impacting our vagus nerve, right? Because of the throat. So we're starting it right there. And then when you gargle, because it's connected down to your intestines, I'm talking about hard gargling, and I'm not just talking about I'm talking about lots of hard gargling. It will actually help you with your bowels too. So you might notice that you have poor vagal tone if you have trouble with your bowels. Okay, that's one indication.
Meaning constipation. That's the trouble we're talking about.
Yeah, constipation, okay. or always have loose stools.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So it works either way.
Either way, anything that's like disruptive and doesn't seem normal, right? Because when you think about like being under stress, like if I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, the last thing my body is going to be doing is mindfully digesting food.
Right.
So it's either going to spill it all out or hang on to it, right? Like it's not going to be digesting anything. So
yes, which is why we say rest and digest.
Right. Exactly. So gargling, singing loudly, so you're still engaging that back there. And if you think about monks or anything like that, or even some yoga when they're like, like you're still engaging this part right here. So this is a weird one too, and some people don't like it, like gagging. So like if you were to put a tongue depressor down, right? So that automatically starts it. These are weird things to do, but I will tell you, if the only thing you want to try is gargling, talk about an easier solution than like changing everything about your life right now. So I like to look at things as like good, better, and best. So best case scenario would be, I'm going to focus 100% on my nutrition. I'm going to go to yoga and I'm going to do it mindfully all the time, all this stuff. But good is, okay, I am mentally not there yet, so I'm going to gargle 3 times a day. To me, that's good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And easy. Everybody could do it.
Okay,
Gargle in the
exactly.
shower.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so starting with some vagal nerve tone is hugely important for people that are under a large amount of stress or put a large amount of stress on themselves because they literally have not engaged that vagus nerve.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And so engaging the vagus nerve, does it help with our, is it essentially teaching our body to automatically calm us in stressful situations? Is that
Yes. Yeah,
working?
pretty much. I mean, when you think about like a toddler, right? So a toddler will have like a tantrum. "Ah!" over here. And you're like, "Ah!" you're freaking out because your toddler's having a tantrum. 2 seconds later, your toddler is like playing with something calmly, right? And you're still like, I don't know what just happened,
Right.
so we have that innate ability to self-soothe, and our kids, unless they've gotten involved in some traumatic thing, that's a whole different thing, have the ability to do that. Over time, we lose it because we have more stress than not. Because I think like we try to protect our children from stress, so they still have that ability to self-soothe. And as you get older, you start losing that ability to self-soothe, especially if you're under a lot of stress or you just like chaos in your life. There are people that enjoy a chaotic life. I'm not one of them, but there are people that do, So when you engage your vagus nerve again, like I said, that's tied to your autonomic nervous system, which is tied to your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your calm state. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just writing that down. I was like, so we're working on the parasympathetic because it sounds kind of backwards when we'll think about it. Sympathetic, you would think that, oh, my body's sympathizing, it's calming, but
no,
it's sympathizing to the stress. It's responding to the stress.
Right.
And then the parasympathetic kicks in to calm down and help you with resting and digesting.
Right. So when you think about like our lifestyles now, like we don't really do much to engage in the parasympathetic side. We're just constantly fighting fires and putting out things and trying to solve problems.
Yep.
But we need to be mindfully respecting the parasympathetic side.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at our culture compared to even other cultures today and age, or if you go back centuries ago. Yes, like you said, there was a true need to have the sympathetic system respond and say, oh my goodness, I've got to run from this tiger or whatever the situation was. I've got to find food for my family. That can be stressful, right? And in a sense, yes, we have to feed our families today. So sometimes, depending on if our job is at stake or things like that, that can absolutely be stressful. But isn't it amazing how many of those stressors we actually create for ourselves because of the choices we make? We tell ourselves we have to have this and we have to do that, and our children have to know this, and they have to be able to, oh my goodness, I want them to be able to go to the best college and have the best opportunities. And who doesn't? That's a great aspiration for our children. But are we teaching them? Are we pushing them into a life of stress? Really, for what? Would they not have opportunities if we didn't have them learn 3 languages and 4 sports, and the list goes on?
Right. I got to tell you, I'm probably one of the most laid back parents around. Our youngest is 17, and I jokingly say I'm just phoning it in now. Like our youngest of 3, I'm like, I'm just phoning it in, whatever. But I've been pretty laid back. I hope my daughters would think the same thing, but I've been pretty laid back in the fact that not pushing them. And the thing is that even though I didn't push them, and I signed them up for stuff, but I didn't sign them up for 5 things or for every night of the week or, whatever.
Yeah.
They became self-motivated. If they wanted to do it, they would come to me and they knew that their choices would be supported. It just wasn't like, I would tell them, and this isn't going to be popular. So should I take AP classes in high school? And this is what I say. Why? Well, to get into a good college. I'm like, no. I said, that doesn't always mean you're going to get into a good college. It doesn't, like, can you get into college with what you're doing? Absolutely, you can,
Yeah.
and that hasn't prevented any of my kids from doing the things that they love to do. I've just kind of put the cap down and be like, you know what? There is time in your life to do all the things. There's time in your life. You don't have to do it all before you're 18. I think a lot of that has to do with parents, this belief that maybe their kids can't or won't be good enough unless they're doing all these things. And that's parent projection, that's parent projection. And this goes all the way back to both of my kids I had one kid that's a July baby and one that was an October baby. So my October kids started school when they were already 5. So they're already a little bit older. You would not believe the amount of people that asked me, well, aren't you going to get them tested so they can start earlier? And I said, no. Why? What's the rush? Like we have this huge rush in society and to do more, be more, get more. And trust me, I've been involved in that. How do you think I have so many credentials, man? Like
yes.
I
was just thinking about you as you were talking.
Yes. And I've had to slow way down in my life too, because it doesn't mean I'm worth more or less to have more degrees, more certifications, whatever. It's what I choose to do with all of those things. But I think, parents, and I don't mean to pick on parents because I am one, but we do a lot of projection on our kids and want them to be better than we are. And in order to do that, now I'm going to correct everything that I wish I would have done and put it on you in less than 18 years. And that's just not fair. And there's so many kids with anxiety and so many kids with depression, and because they feel this vice grip of stress,
Right.
So parents, release the vice grip. It's okay if they're not in everything.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's great. I'm not a parent, but I can see it. And sometimes it's easier when you're not, because you can just look from the outside looking in. It's like, oh man, that's too bad. And most of my community are women, and I feel that we also, of course, every gender, race, age, we can go down the list, has their own issues. I mean, we've just talked about kids, poor things, and the stresses that we put under them. But I think a lot of times as women, because of society and the image that we're seeing on television, magazines, the list goes on, we have to look that way. And then, we need to be a rock star in the boardroom and in the bedroom. And as moms, we've got to make sure we get all the homework done with the kids. And, food's got to be on the table. The house has got to be perfect, immaculate, all of these things, or we just don't add up. And no wonder that causes anxiety, right? Because
I have to be a triple threat all the time, and it's just too much. And you really just kind of need to determine what is the most important thing in your life, and are you living that? And for me, my kids are grown now. It's like the most important thing is that everybody is just happy and relaxed. That's the most important thing, because mental health symptoms aren't always born. I'm going to say this because there's genetic coding around it, but most of that coding has to do with stress, right? Turning the coding on due to a stressful environment, but it's not a defect. Like we are looking at mental health these days as if it's some type of strange defect. And I hate that idea, because I believe it has to do with a lot with stress. And because when we're stressed, we're not eating, or we're not eating correctly. So, this is that, where does it begin? Where does it end? But without so I start with the brain, because without the brain, you wouldn't have anything else to worry about, right? Like if your brain were out of your head, nothing else matters, right? It's the central thing. Start with the brain, work on the rest. Right? So if we can find some balance with neurotransmitters, then people start feeling better and they're more on board to work on the rest. right?
Mm.
When your brain is online, you are willing and able to work on the rest. Let's get those brains online.
Yeah, exactly. Can you explain to everybody what is a neurotransmitter?
Well, a neurotransmitter is a chemical messenger in your, actually, it's not just in your brain, it's in your entire body. Actually, more serotonin is produced in your stomach, in your digestive system, than in your brain anyway. So that's kind of the importance of food. But it tells us mood, libido, pretty much any messenger that you need, any message that your body needs to have, it comes from a neurotransmitter. So they're, again, most important thing, because they tell our bodies what to do, and our bodies react to those neurotransmitter levels, whether there's too much or too little, in imbalance. So I have found such great success starting there and then moving people in other directions. Some people are like, well, start in the gut. I'm like, listen, I understand the gut brain connection. I understand it 100%. But it takes a long time to heal your gut. And you're not going to find immediate benefit by just focusing on your gut. And you're going to lose people because they want to feel better faster. And so I found the neurotransmitter repair allows people to feel better faster. Then they can work on their gut, or simultaneously. Again, I think sometimes in the holistic community, we still pick one part of the body to only focus on. And we can't do that. It has to be a synergistic plan, right?
Absolutely. And not just the body. Like you said, we look at mental health like something crazy, but it's a third of who we are. If you consider that we are mind, body, and spirit, right?
Right.
Spirit, soul kind of being the same, right? So 1/3 of what we are at our essence, you can't ignore that. It's not just for special people.
Right.
Mental health is essential, right? To the body working.
Right. And mental health doesn't always have to be negative. So it can be positive and negative, So yeah, it's just that it's an important topic, and it's just different ways of looking at it. But again, starting with something small, diet can be some small intentional changes in diet are extremely helpful. So I'm happy that you do the work that you do, because I think those nice, small, intentional things and mindset is a great place to start,
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think it's about time to wrap up. But did you have anything else that you wanted to share, Dr. Teralyn, before we close out?
No, just if everyone likes the conversation, head on over to kickoffyourdamnheels.com.
Yeah.
And I had to swear in that because that is the name of it.
Got it. Okay. We forgive you.
Thank you.
We'll get over it.
All right.
I love it. You're you, and I love it. So that's where we can find you. Kickoffyourdamnheels.com.
Correct.
Okay, got it. And I will end up sending this, putting it out on Facebook and sending it to my newsletter. And so I'll have that website connected just so everybody can spell everything appropriately. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have. Thank you, Dr. Teralyn, for letting me pick your brain. I feel like we just scratched the surface. So there may be some future interviews coming.
Absolutely. As per usual, Leah, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.